Hello, wonderful history students, and welcome to our flipped recording on the Unit 6 review. We're going to take a quick review of Unit 6 and just kind of point you to the things that you need to review before you come to our flipped follow-up, where we are going to play some awesome review games. So let's take a look really quickly at the unit review in your course. And so to get started, we're going to click on that. And as you can see, it tells us that we are going to review before you take the unit assessment in the next lesson. Remember to open up those lesson resources and open up the student guide to view as you go through the lesson. So just some reminders about what we learned in Unit 6. You traveled to India and China and saw the birth of Confucianism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. So think about the religious and the philosophical ideas that you've read about as you review for the unit test. A quick review of Confucianism. Confucius was born in China during a time of turmoil around 551 BC. The Zhou dynasty had dissolved, leaving an unruly collection of warring states. The governments and rulers of these states were often cruel and indifferent, and they cared little about the common people, and justice was almost nowhere to be found. All of this influence in the young Confucius, who at an early age decided to become a scholar. He became a learned man and traveled from state to state, passing on his ideas to all who would listen. So Confucius believed that rulers should act with virtue and that people should treat others fairly. He urged rulers to reform themselves and work harder to bring good government to the people. He continued to teach, hoping that the young people he taught would someday become enlightened rulers. So Confucius believed that family was a good model for Chinese society. In Chinese families, people learned respect, cooperation, and good habits that helped them deal fairly with others. Confucius believed that if everyone treated each other fairly and with respect, that society as a whole would be more harmonious. So Confucius also believed people had 5 basic kinds of relationships with one another. He taught that a successful society requires people to take their proper roles in each of these relationships. So make sure that you have these in your notes. The 5 relationships are parent and child, elder brother and younger brother, sisters too, husband and wife, ruler and subject, and then friends. Do not do to others what you do not want them to do to you. That is, Confucius taught the earliest form of the golden rule to encourage harmony in society. I still use the golden rule. I hope you do too. It is a good rule, and maybe you learned that now that it derived from Confucius. So for Confucius, learning how to live with others was the most important thing in life, more important even than making offerings to gods. In fact, Confucius did not talk about gods or God as religions do. He only talked about a way to live. So his teachings are not a religion, they are just a philosophy of how to live. He did not speak of heaven, however, or he did speak of heaven, however. Confucius believed that the way of heaven was the great spirit of wisdom and goodness that prompted people to consider the needs of others. After Confucius died, his students wrote down his teachings and sayings in a book that later became known as the Analects of Confucius. And the students traveled throughout China, becoming teachers, government officials, court advisors, and in this way, Confucius's ideas became widespread. Today, thousands of years later, Confucianism's influence is still evident throughout large parts of East Asia. Now let's take a brief look at Hinduism. It's one of the world's oldest living religions. Today it has between 800 and 900 million followers. Most of them live in India. Hinduism took shape as people and cultures of the Indus Valley mixed with those of Aryan language speakers who migrated from Central Asia and settled in India's the Ganges Plain. The Aryan-dominated cultures that established themselves in India gradually developed a system of social classes that became known as the caste system. The classes were religious and social in nature, and over time they developed its own rules and behavior. So social contact between people of different castes was very limited, and marriage between castes was forbidden. So the castes were, and make sure that you have these in your notes, and we're talking again about Hinduism. That was the Brahmins, the religious leaders and keepers of the sacred books. The Kashras, the warriors and nobles, the Vaishya, the merchants and farmers, the Shudras, the servants and ordinary workers, and the outcasts, the untouchables, whom the Brahmins excluded from the rest of society. So this system of castes formed the basic structure of a new society in India. The caste system also came to play a central role in the emerging religion of Hinduism. All right, so Hindus worship many gods and one universal essence, but three main gods came to the forefront of the religion over the first millennium BC. The Brahma, the four-headed creator god, Vishnu, the preserver of the world, and Shiva, the god of destruction. In addition to these three deities, Hinduism has thousands of other gods and goddesses. Each has his or her own personality and a specific role. And as more and more Aryans settled near the Ganges River, the river itself became sacred to the people. According to the tradition, the Ganges River has a divine source. It is said to flow down from Shiva's hair. Hindus believe that the sacred Ganges will purify worshippers who bathe in its waters. You can also click on this to see those gods and goddesses. One of Hinduism's key beliefs is that of reincarnation. Hindus believe that the essential self of a living being never dies. Instead, when the body dies, the self is reborn, either as human or animal, and the Hindus believe that life is a cycle of death and rebirth. They also believe that a person's actions in one life determine the caste or position that the person will have in the next life. The self goes through as many lives as necessary to reach spiritual perfection. The caste system had become deeply intertwined with Hindu religious beliefs by 1000 BC. By working hard and fulfilling duties of his caste, a person could hope for a better life next time around and eventually spiritual perfection. These religious beliefs help convince people at the bottom of society to keep their present condition and authority of those above them. All right, and then Buddhism. Buddhism, like Hinduism, developed in India. The two faiths share a lot of important beliefs. Buddhism is a way of life and a religion for more than 360 million people in the world today. Most Buddhists live in Asia. Buddhism got its start around 500 BC when a prince embarked on a search to solve the problem of suffering, and that was Siddhartha Gautama. He was a Hindu born into the noble warrior caste. And as a young man, he witnessed suffering, and he decided to find out why people suffer and how people could become peaceful and content in a world where all must suffer and die. While searching for the truth about suffering, Siddhartha sat under a tree for days thinking about good and evil, life and death, and Buddhists believe that his mind opened up and he understood the truth about life. After his life-changing experience or his enlightenment, Siddhartha Gautama came to be called the Buddha, which means the enlightened one. The Buddha began to travel and teach his message. He said that people could attain freedom for suffering and that freedom was called nirvana. So he taught that nirvana was the highest goal for human beings who seek the end cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. And Buddhists believed in reincarnation, just like the Hindus. However, Buddha rejected the caste system. Reaching nirvana had nothing to do with caste, he said, and it all depended on a person's actions and deeds. And by deeds, a person is a Brahmin, said Buddha. So by deeds, a person is an outcast. So this new idea gave hope to people held down by circumstances of their birth, that they could do better and reach a higher class. Buddha taught that life is a great wheel of suffering, the will of Dhamma. To escape, he said, a person must understand the Four Noble Truths. Again, make sure these are in your notes. That is, all life is suffering. Suffering is caused by desires and greed. And there can be an end to suffering and desires. There is a path to nirvana. So to find the path to nirvana, Buddha said people should follow the middle way. They should avoid excesses. He also preached an eightfold noble path to live good life and progress toward nirvana. So people needed to practice right understanding, effort, speech, action, livelihood, mindfulness, thought, and concentration. All right, there is a map that you can kind of take a look at, the different cities and religions there on that map. After Buddha's death, some people began to think of Buddha as a god. They believed he had came to save men and women from pain and unhappiness, and others believed he was just a wise man who taught others how to lead good lives. Buddha's ideas and teachings spread, and as they spread to different lands, the people in exam as they spread to different lands, the people in Buddhism today. Oh, wait, examine the map to understand where people practice Buddhism today. Goodness. The spread of Buddhism can be attributed largely to a ruler named Asoka. Asoka came to power in northern India around 269 BC. He was a cruel and ruthless conqueror. Later in his life, however, he was filled with remorse and sought wisdom from Buddhist monks. He became a Buddhist and vowed to rule with righteousness. Asoka built hospitals, roads, places of worship, and other religious monuments, and he sent missionary monks to present-day Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, China, Korea, and Japan. So though India was the birthplace of Buddhism, Hinduism continued to dominate the country, but because of the Buddhist missionaries Asoka sent out, people in many parts of East Asia and Indonesia now practice Buddhism. So that was a mouthful. That was a big review kind of the different religions that we took a look at in this unit. So you should review by going through your history journal, review all your activity sheets, reading guides, keywords, any writing assignments that you completed, offline tests that you took, skim through the chapters as you read the unit, and just make sure there's that you have studied everything. You can also use that SMORE resource for the study guide and notes guide. Okay. So good luck on. I will see you in the flip follow-up to look at some review games for Unit 6. Thanks.